Today we're going to do a Shabbat Q&A session. Okay, we'll call this for Zone 1, but actually everybody can be on there from anywhere in the world that happens to want to be up late enough wherever they are to do this. But I do want to cover a couple of things in advance of opening up to any kind of questions that I know are topics and issues that are current, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about is sort of holidays versus holy days. Because right now we've got, let's call it holidays, holy days, and traditions. Because right now we don't have any holy days happening. We do have a holiday, which is sort of a secular, whatever connected thing like Christmas, and we do have a tradition like Hanukkah. So there's sort of three categories of things. All right, three categories. So let's address them kind of, because a lot of people who are new, and even if you're not that new, but maybe you really haven't dealt with this, because you came into starting after the seasons, and so you hadn't had to deal with this. This is your first time really dealing with it, or maybe your second time because you already realized how badly you handled it the first time, or whatever it is. But let's understand these things. So we have in Leviticus 23, holy days. Okay, we have a listing of holy days, kadosh days, set apart days that the Creator set apart. So that's category 1. We have a teaching called the Intro to Appointed Times of Yahweh. There are other teachings related to the various holy days, and as we celebrate them together, we get familiar with them. All right. Then the second category, okay, so we're going to go in sort of the hierarchy of the most important down to the one that we really shouldn't even be doing. So obviously, holy days mandated from above, participation required, and you need to understand what to do, when to do it, where to do it, how to do it, related to each of those holy days, okay? Because every holy day has its own specific, unique things that are connected with it. So we have lots of teachings that cover that. We deal with them on a regular basis. So then the second level thing is traditions, okay? And by the way, you can have some traditions that are national, some traditions that are family. And so let's remember that traditions, as long as they do not do one of these two things, are totally okay to do. As long as the tradition, A, does not get elevated to being like Yahweh commanded it, so it doesn't fall into category 1. So I have category 1 is the holy days, 2 is traditions, 3 is secular pagan observances. Okay, things that we call holidays that you don't really get involved with. And so if we're in a category 2 thing, a tradition, you can never look at it or believe it to be or treat it as if Yah said it when he didn't say it. That's category 1 of traditions. That's all traditions, by the way. There is no, thus said Yahweh, you must pray before you eat, so don't act like Yahweh said it. It's a tradition that's good, though. There's nothing wrong with praying before you eat. Just recognize that it's not a Torah command. So let's not elevate, this is something I have from my background, from the Jewish background. The Jewish side has very much blurred that line, which is a part of what Yeshua argued about with them on a regular basis. That was the whole point of Mark chapter 7. The disciples are eating without washing their hands according to a tradition, which is called nitilat yadayim, okay, the washing of hands. And so he gets called out and said, why do your disciples eat bread? By the way, they're eating bread. This wasn't pork or shrimp with unwashed hands. And it wasn't that they didn't wash their hands. They didn't do the tradition, okay? So it doesn't say they washed their hands or not, but they were talking about a tradition. They said, why do they not keep the traditions of the elders? It wasn't a tradition of the elders to wash your hands before you eat, okay? People either did or they didn't, whatever it was based on their how they were raised, but they had a very specific thing called nitilat yadayim, which was a ritual of washing that was done before eating, okay? And so Yeshua addressed both the two issues that I'm going to address here. He addressed A, you are now elevating a tradition to an Elohim level thing, which it is not, so all they're doing is breaking a tradition, so why are you so upset? And then he brings up the second issue. What's the second issue? By the way, he never said it was wrong to do the washing of hands. He simply said that it wasn't a thus said Yahweh. It's not a Torah command. The second issue is allowing your tradition to somehow get in the way of, interfere with, or override a Torah command. So your traditions cannot do that. So when people come to me, well, is it okay to do this and this and this? Ask the simple test, 2 questions. Are you treating it as if Yahweh said it when he didn't? No. Well, then it's okay. So far, so good. Does it in any way interfere with, override, or is it a problem for a Torah command? Does it have anything where it's in conflict with, overrides, or interferes with the observance of a Torah command? And if the answer to that is also no, then it's fine. Okay? Then it's a fine thing to do. You know, my wife's family had a tradition to open up Shabbat a certain way. A lot of you people have this idea of opening Shabbat or closing Shabbat. It's a very good thing to do. There's nowhere in Scripture that tells you to do this. So it's not a Torah command. Does it interfere with anything in the Torah? No. Now, it all depends on what you do, though, to open and close it, though. Then you have to ask those questions. But recognize that these are traditions, then, that we develop. And traditions are great, because traditions are ways to enrich the quality and the memory to do the things that you need to do. Shabbat comes, if you have a ritual or a tradition to open Shabbat a certain way, it's a way of focusing your mind on the change from secular time to kadosh time. So it's great to do a traditional thing that has a ritual that your whole mindset knows we're switching from one to the other. And the same thing at the end for closing Shabbat. You can do that as well. These are not required. But now that by the same token, nations, families will have traditional observances. You know, we have here in this country things like Veterans Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July. These are things that have to do with things that have happened in our nation's history. Okay, do those get in the way of any Torah observance? No. Is there any command against it anywhere? No. As a matter of fact, we find that there are things that Israel did as a nation that are not commanded from Yah, but he recognizes them. Okay? So you have, for example, in the book of Esther, that Israel imposes, or Judah imposes on itself as a nation, the observance of Purim. Now, Yahweh never says this is a wrong thing to do, but it's not from him, so it's not mandated as a Torah command, so if you don't do it, you're not in trouble. But this is a national memorial to an event where they basically, they could have been killed and they weren't killed. And so they want to celebrate. Okay? So you have those. There's a book, in one of the prophets, it talks about a bunch of fasting days that are not actually commanded fasting days from above, but they had to do with events that the Jews experienced, or Israel experienced in their time, that they were commemorating with a day of fasting. And again, nothing wrong with that as long as you recognize it's self-imposed, it's not from above, and you're not either in some way utilizing it to override a Torah command or undermine a Torah command, and you're not treating it like a Torah command, and it doesn't go against a Torah command. Nowhere in Scripture does it say you can't fast for other reasons than Yom Kippur. Okay, are we following this so far? Okay, so, because I've had people leave, not too many, one or two leave over the fact that we were keeping Hanukkah. And I was like, I don't understand what that's all about. Okay, so now we're going to go to the second level here. We're going to continue by looking at Hanukkah, Purim. These are two celebrations that we will tend to do. You can participate or not. They are not in category 1. Okay? They're not mandated as Torah instructions. Now, of course, in the book of Esther, it says that they impose it on themselves and all that would attach themselves to them. That kind of sounds a lot like Romans 11 and the tree and grafting in. So we can choose to observe as grafting into that Jewish root, which, okay, people say, well, it's not a Jewish root, it's an Israel root. I get that, but they're talking there in Romans about the existing covenanted people, the Jews. Everybody else was dispersed and invisible at that point. They didn't know who was who. And so that's the imagery that's being dealt with there. Okay, so Hanukkah. What is Hanukkah? So we have a battle going on where the Greeks were having a problem with the Jewish community. Okay, this is about 180 or so, whatever years before Yeshua, something like that. I forget how many years it was, but it's a good little time right before Yeshua. And in that time frame, of course, you have to understand the first battles wasn't between the Jews and the Greeks, between the Jews and the Jews. Okay? The Jews that were Hellenizing, in other words, becoming Greek influenced with Greek philosophy, and Greek traditions, and Greek lifestyle, were called Hellenized. Okay? And the Jews that were not happy with the Jews that were going in that direction. And that was a big battle initially. Then the Greeks got involved, long story short, ended up desecrating the temple. They set up the abomination of desolation in the holy place with the statue. And so we have the victory of the Maccabees. They throw the Greeks out. They now need to rededicate and clean out the temple. So they have to cleanse it out, remove all things that don't belong in there, scrub the whole place down, clean everything up, do all the purification rituals that were required for the temple. Now this is happening very close to the end of the summer into the fall, where they could maybe get it done in time for Sukkot, and they didn't get it done in time. There was too much to do. There wasn't enough time. Plus, the preparing of the oil. I know there's a legend about the oil burning for 8 days. It should have lasted one, et cetera, et cetera. There is no documentation that says that ever happened. That doesn't mean it didn't. We just can't find any documentation that said that's what happened. All right? But we do know that the process of making the oil takes 8 days. And so that's somewhat linked to all of this. Okay? So, they cleaned the temple out. They wanted it for Sukkot. What is Sukkot? It's 7 days plus the 8th day festival, so it's 8 days. Now, they really had, everybody was so, just pumped up to do this celebration, and it didn't happen. So now they're wanting to do it anyway, but they realize, well, we're not going to make the mistake of Jeroboam and move feasts around and move temples around and do all these things that happened in Jeroboam's day. So we can't do that. So now we're not going to have we're not going to create a Torah command that doesn't exist, nor are we going to manipulate one that exists. So why don't we have a dedication festival to rededicate the temple? Let's do that for 8 days. I know that matches Sukkot with Shemini Atzeret too. So we'll have an 8-day festival. It's a tradition. We're going to just be excited that we're rededicating the temple. And then as they enjoyed that so much, they decided the next year we'll do it again. And now it became a tradition. Okay? Now you do see in John 10 that Yeshua is on Hanukkah on Solomon's porch. So it even gets mentioned in the Birchat Hashah, in the book of John. Okay? John 10 and verse 22. And Yeshua was walking in a set-apart place in the porch of Solomon. Actually, verse 22, at the time of the Hanukkah came to be in Jerusalem. In some translations it says, and the feast of dedication. Now, if you didn't understand that's what Hanukkah was, you would have read that and go, what is the feast of dedication anyway? But it was the time of Hanukkah that came to be in Jerusalem. It was winter. And Yeshua was walking in the set-apart place on the porch of Solomon. Okay? And this is what's going on. So we're getting the context of where Yeshua is and what is happening in the life. Okay? Now there's a lot more going on if we want to go further into the beginning of the chapter, then later in the chapter to see, what kind of connections there may be. Why is Hanukkah part of the middle of all this discussion? And that would be a whole nother discussion. Maybe we'll put a teaching together that covers that within there. But understand that this is Yeshua actually not celebrating Hanukkah, it doesn't say that, but the Feast of Hanukkah is mentioned in connection with Yeshua here. There's a reason. Okay? There's a reason. Now, it may be, as I'm looking at it real quickly, he's talking about, they say to him, well, how long do you keep us in suspense? If you're the Messiah, say to us plainly. He said, I've told you, you don't believe the works that I do in my Father's name. They bear witness concerning me, but you do not believe because you're not of my sheep, as I've said to you. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. What was Hanukkah all about? It was basically a battle over sheep. Some of the sheep wanted to become Greek and Hellenized. Some of them wanted to stay covenanted to Yahweh. The Jews were going in a different direction here. So we're talking about dedication. Are you dedicated to covenant? Are you dedicated to this sort of secular humanism, Greek philosophy, whatever they were going for at the time? Okay? And so you can see there, I'm sure if we read the context here, that all of this has to do with our level of dedication. There's a reason that Hanukkah is in the middle of all this. All right? So level 1, they're Yahweh's feasts. Level 2, they're traditions. Hanukkah is a tradition. Now, the Hanukkah tradition is to celebrate the rededication of the temple. It is not to be turned into sort of a Torah observant version or a scriptural version or a Jewish version of Christmas. That was done by the Jews of America in like the 60s. So it's a very recent, change of behavior. Let's not do that, okay? It is not a gift-giving time. If anything, Purim has gift-giving connected to it, and giving to the poor. There's a piece of that at the end of the chapter, at the end of the book of Esther, that talks about giving of gifts. And it's not done in a Christmas type of way, all right? But there's nothing connecting Hanukkah to that until the 1960s or so, when the American Jews realized that their children going to public school were hearing about all their other children getting all these Christmas stuff, and they were trying to figure out how to compete with that. Okay? Oh, they got 1 day, we'll give you 8 days of gifts. Okay? So let's not do that. Don't do that. All right. Which is going to link us now into our point number 3. So actually, let's continue with point number 2 just for a second. So Purim fits into the same category as Hanukkah as a tradition that we do. That's not part of the Leviticus 23 celebrations, but they are celebrations that it would be appropriate for us to have. Okay? And when we get closer to Purim, we can talk more about Purim. During that Q&A right before Purim, we'll do one of these, and we'll talk more about how that should be done and where that fits in. Okay, but right now we're dealing with Hanukkah, which starts, in about a week. Okay, now, so the third category is the inappropriate, pagan-based celebrations. Okay, we have the first 2 categories are appropriate in their levels. One is mandated from above, the other is allowable from above, the third one is completely aberrant and should not be done. Okay? So that's things like Christmas, Easter, Halloween, Valentine's Day. Okay, these are things we should not be doing. Why? And I had a question come up, one of the counseling sessions I did in the last week or two said, well, why? I said, they say, well, I found the verse about the tree. Well, Jeremiah, when it talks about the tree, may or may not be talking about something that we see today as a Christmas tree. It certainly sounds like one, but that's not the whole point. What is the problem with Christmas? Well, there's a million of them, but the first basic concept of the problem is and I have a teaching on this, is he says very clearly, multiple times, do not do to me like they do to their false gods. That's the basic framework. Are we understanding that? Okay? Do not do to me. So if they use trees and they use all this other stuff, and they do whatever it is that they do not bring that into what's mine. Look, you see this, people don't understand. The golden calf, most of you did not know this, so you maybe heard it from here. That golden calf was not them celebrating a pagan god and saying that pagan god. They said that was Yahweh. They did unto him what they do unto the pagan gods. They didn't say this was Mneves the bull, or one of the other pagan bull gods. They said, this is Yahweh. He says, no, you don't do unto me. They make images to their gods, you don't make images to me. They throw children into fire, you don't throw children into fire. Okay, all these things, they drink blood, you don't drink blood. Do not do to me. So we have Christmas, we have Easter, we've got these things. And so we have to understand where they came from and how we ended up with them. We ended up with them because of the Catholic Church using a thing called syncretism. or behaving in a way that we call syncretism. Syncretism is taking two things that do not belong together and putting them together. So these are not things that start off together. And so you have a celebration, the Saturnalia, that was going on in the kingdoms, well, the empire really, but this is around Constantine's time. And he wanted to make everybody Christian or whatever. And yet, their most enjoyable favorite time of year is the Saturnalia thing. And he knew that they weren't going to want to give that up. So why don't we take this thing that's inappropriate and spin it and put lipstick on the pig, okay? Basically. And that's how you ended up with it, which is why people always go, well, but he's the reason for the season. And then because we get emotionally attached to that stuff, it's hard to let it go for a lot of people, okay? Very hard to let it go because there's an emotional connection to it. Family time was connected to it. A lot of joy was connected to it. Of course, you forget all the misery connected to it, the depression connected to it, the financial, ruin that is connected to it because of all the money that is spent. But no, you have these moments that you remember. And it's warm fuzzies and it gets you all attached to the whole thing. All right? But see, I want you to think of it more this way. How would you feel if you, all of a sudden out of nowhere, one of your, you're just going through life, and your wife or whichever you are, the wife or husband, the spouse comes up to you and says, sweetheart, I think we're going to start celebrating your birthday on this other day, which you know was their last ex before you. Okay? How would that make you feel? Okay, so I'll do it from the guy's point of view. So the wife comes over and goes, sweetheart, now let's say the sweetheart's birthday is on, let's say it's on February 3rd, and then the ex's birthday is on, June 10th. And so, sweetheart, I think we're going to start celebrating your birthday on June 10th. And you're thinking, but wait a minute, isn't that George's birthday or Bob's birthday, whatever the guy would have been? And you're like, wait a second. And then she says, no, it's okay because it's going to be about the children and we're going to give them presents. And well, wait a minute, it's my birthday. So now it's not only my birthday now, it's George or Bob or whoever's other birthday, and we're going to now give presents to the kids. What does it have to do with me? There's no way you'd be okay with this. All right? But isn't that what we're doing here? Every pagan Messiah-like figure was born on, guess what day? December 25th. Go look it up. So of course they want to put Messiah on December 25th. So it's definitely not his birthday. Well, then when was he born? I don't know. But I know it could not have been in the winter. Okay, the shepherds wouldn't have been out with their flocks out in the field in the winter in Israel. Because it says that the angel went to announce this in the winter and the shepherds were out with their flocks, according to the December model. No, they were out with their flocks because it was not December. Okay? And we can argue and debate why we think it could have been during whatever, a different time of year. But it's pretty universally understood he was not born on December 25th. And so we want to understand here, do not do as they do. That's the premise for the whole thing. When we look at Easter, same problem. Oh no, we know that Passover's around them, but we're celebrating the resurrection. And Ishtar has what to do with that? And what does that have to do with an egg-laying rabbit? Okay? We've lost our ability to think rationally. Okay? I was thinking of doing a podcast called Return to Rational Thinking. Because the politics we see going on, the reaction to COVID that we see going, none of it's rational. We've lost all rational thinking. Okay? By the way, here's a quick fun fact for you. The new vaccines that are coming out are being touted as 90% to 92 or 95% effective. Doing nothing is 98.5% effective. So doing nothing still is better. When you consider that I just did the math, as I told you I always do, and the last time I did the math, we're at a morbidity rate of 1.9%. We're under 2%. So doing nothing still is a better number, just so you know. But there's nobody out there saying that. There's no rational thinking, okay? There's a few, okay, I understand that. But I'm saying, but the vast majority out there are just not thinking, all right? And the same thing happens here. When they look at the spin that they're doing to create this Easter celebration. Now, of course, part of it requires you to buy into weird things like egg-laying rabbits. Part of it gets you to buy into the fact that you can't do simple math and count to 3. Okay? Well, he did say he was going to be in the grave 3 days and 3 nights, and I know you can't really make that happen between Friday night and Sunday, but you know. Maybe because he didn't die Friday night and raise on Sunday. How's that? Maybe he did exactly what he said he would do, considering it's the only sign he said he would give them. 72 hours. So if you could do the math, when did he die? Like, don't tell me what day. What time did he die? About 3 in the afternoon, it says, right? Now, that's based on the 6th hour, the 9th hour, like when they use that math the way they do. Okay, so about 3 in the afternoon. So guess what time he resurrected? Did he resurrect at sunrise? No. He rose at 3 in the afternoon on some day. So now you have to figure out what day that was. Well, let's see. You know it couldn't be Sunday because they got there early in the morning Sunday, and the angel said, he's not here. He didn't say, man, you just missed him, you know. If you had just got up a little early, if you got here a little faster and didn't stop on the way, man, you just missed him, okay? He doesn't say that. He's like, why are you here? He's not here. He's already gone. So that means that we now need to start figuring out, well, if it wasn't Sunday at 3 o'clock, the next choice is Saturday at 3 o'clock. You just kind of work your way backwards. After all, he is Lord of the Sabbath. So what resurrecting on Shabbat sort of makes more sense, okay? So now you have a double problem with Easter than you had with Christmas. Okay, Christmas, what you have is a do not do as they do problem. Easter, you actually have a problem because you're dealing with a real thing that did happen and making it so that people have it completely wrong. And they're not getting it right, they're not understanding it, they're not appreciating it correctly, and it completely diminishes, dilutes, whatever the focus may be on Passover. Because Christians don't focus on Passover. Now they only focus on Easter. So it's a problem on all kinds of levels with the things that I was talking about. It does interfere with, it does undermine, it does get in the way of a Torah instruction, as well as being do not do as they do. Because I can promise you I haven't seen anywhere in the scriptures anything about an egg-laying rabbit, okay? There may be some beasts in here I don't understand, like Leviathan or something else, but there's no egg-laying rabbit, okay? With the teeth. No, I'm sorry, that's a Monty Python thing. All right. Okay. Go watch The Holy Grail. Okay, anyway. All right. But there's a problem there. Okay, now. So I wanted to make sure we covered that. Maybe I'll never get to the Q&A part. We'll see how we go today. Who knows? I'm on a roll. Okay, now I want you to understand. Okay, so we have appropriate holy days. We have these traditions that are also okay, and now we start to look at these ones that are not okay. Like the way the church has started to embrace Halloween as, well, now we're going to spin it. You're watching modern day spin live. Okay, like Christmas and Easter were created way before you ever were born. But you're seeing them now turn it into a fall festival. Okay, you're seeing the total modern day spin being implemented All these churches say, oh no, we don't do Halloween. We dress up in costumes and everything else and do all that. But on October 31st, but it's our fall festival. All right. So let's talk about the next level of it. What do we deal, now we have to deal with the fact that we live in a world where all this is going on. Okay? We now establish and understand why we don't do what we don't do and why we should do what we should do and what's okay to do. Those are your three different levels. But now we live in a world where all of this is going on. So first of all, we should be doing the feasts. Let's make sure we're doing them, keeping them. Let's deal with level one. They are obligated to covenanted people. All right? Let's do that. All right? The second part is, let's choose and decide if we're going to do the traditions or not. The traditions, if you're doing them, great. If you're not doing them and others are doing them, don't give them any grief. I told you, we lost one or two people over the fact that we were doing Hanukkah. They're like, how could you do Hanukkah? Because you don't understand it. That's why you're having this problem. Even though I did teachings on it called The Time to Rededicate Yourself. Okay? And so, anyway. So let's keep the traditions. Even Paul says what? Paul says, keep the traditions I taught you. This isn't where like the other places that keep the commandments. He said keep the traditions. Paul taught them some traditions. Okay? Now, so then we have the third level one. So the one we're not going to participate in, but everybody around us is doing it, or at least a good majority of them. So how do we deal with that? All right, so first of all, I want you to have this approach. I want you to be thinking about, as you deal with other people, we have to remember that we can't expect from them what we're not going to give. So you need to treat them with respect. If you want them to respect your choice to not keep these things, or your choice to do the holy days, etc., or keep Saturday instead of Sunday, whatever your choices are, then you need to respect their choices. They're their choices. Philippians 2:12, you got to walk out your own salvation. That's, I know that's not a Yahweh said, but it might as well be, in my opinion. Paul nails it. Okay, remember, this is a personal, individual journey done in a group context. But you have to walk out your own thing. Paul is dead on right, okay? Which means everybody else has to walk out their own thing, which means that you need to respect that that's their choice, that's where they are on their journey. And it says, none comes unless the Father pops the bubble, opens the mind, opens the ear. Go back to listening to the journey teaching, okay? If they haven't been on that journey yet, nothing you do is going to affect it except show them disrespect. Let's not put all the funny, in your opinion, right? Funny's always depending on which side of the joke you're on, right? Okay, let's not post all the funny memes that all your Messianic friends are posting about Christmas and this and that and the other thing. It's not funny. You're like, oh no, Rabbi, I needed to change my pants after it was funny. No, your mind is wrong. Okay? It's at someone else's expense. They don't know. You didn't know. Come on. How many of you really, and this is for everybody who could possibly be watching this on the planet, from the moment you were born till now, were never in any of that confusion? Like almost zero, okay? So you were them, basically, which is what Scripture over and over says. Do not forget that you were in Egypt. You were slaves. You were not always this. Remember where you came from. We see this in some of Paul's writings. He says, don't forget that you were once Gentiles and separate from Yahweh and with no hope and now part of the covenant. This is Ephesians 2. We got all kinds of things that are going on to remind us, hey, you're here now, but you weren't always here. And all these people that you're dealing with, they're where you were. They're exactly where you were. And just like you should have been treated with respect when you were there, we got to treat them with respect because they're there. Okay? Now, think about the whole honor and shame thing that we talked about in the honor and shame teaching, right? Okay, if anything you're doing would be doing it to shame them, to embarrass them, this is wrong. All right? If they're doing something you can't give honor to, It goes back to the old thing. Every one of you had a mother or father or somebody that said, hey, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. So if you can't be honoring because they're doing something you can't give honor to, then don't say anything at all. Don't bring shame. Don't try to shame. Don't try to embarrass. Don't try to show how smart you are and how dumb they are. Stop doing all of that. He's got to do all that work. You can't get that part done. There's nothing for you to do there. So let's make sure that we're dealing with, because if you want to deal with your family members, you need to understand, you probably already know this, but you need to understand that they, when you made your choices to walk differently, they feel, because of the difference in walk, threatened by what you're doing, and so they think you're judging them. Because after all, that's what they're doing, they're judging you. So if they're going to do it, they're going to naturally think you're doing it. So how many of you have had a family member tell you, oh, you're judging me, or they feel like you're judging them now that you don't do those things anymore, right? Okay? Lots of you. Very few of you put up hands, though, but I know that you feel that way. You're all like, my hands are in my pockets, it's freezing in here, I can't raise my hand. Kurt just fixed the temperature a little bit, so we should be all right. All right, now. But that's the whole problem, is that they're going to think you're judging them. They, in the discussions you have with them, have to know that you absolutely, 100% want them to recognize your right and responsibility to work out your own salvation, but they also need to know that you respect that they have the same obligation and right to do the same thing. That imposing on the other person is what's inappropriate. This is important. Abba has to do the work. So let's be careful now when we're dealing with category 3, which is the secular worldly stuff that's inappropriate. You have to find a way to not participate or partake of it without dishonoring and shaming the people around you who are partaking and participating as best you can. Now, by the way, if they feel whatever it is they feel, that doesn't mean you actually did it. They're going to try to manipulate you emotionally and accuse you and whatever it is. But you do the best you can not to be the cause of it. All right? Because everyone has a parent that's going to try to use the 5th commandment against you, saying, well, you're not honoring mother and father because you're not doing what I say. Well, that's not what the commandment means. Honor is not obedience necessarily. Now, in covenant, honor is obedience. But when your parents are doing something you know is against covenant, so you can't be obedient, but at least you can treat them in a way that's not dishonoring, that's not trying to shame them. That's a hard thing to do. This is not easy. All right? Now, this brings me into the next part of this that I want to talk about. So I don't even know what we're going to get to other than this, because this stuff is important. All of these things that we're talking about right now are going to, as I've said about the other things throughout our discussions over the years, are going to expose whatever issues might already be there. In this case, it's going to show the level of relationships you have, the quality or the level of relationship you have. And by the way, just because you have one by birth doesn't mean you have a quality that's a good quality or depth of relationship. It just means that person's your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, whatever it is, or one of your children. So what we're going to find out, and this is the second piece of this because it's linked together, because I want to talk about how a unequally yoked marriage deals with Christmas and Easter and all these other things, because that's a big problem right now. Okay, so you need to understand this is for I'll say it's for both, okay? If you're in an equally yoked position, this is not the problem. You should only be doing level 1 and level 2 things and not doing anything with the third level. But if your spouse is not covenanted, okay, if your spouse is not covenanted, I've had people call me on a regular basis and they'll say something like, I'm having a lot of time trying to understand this submission thing. Like either the wife trying to figure out how she submits to her husband when the husband wants to still do Christmas in the house, or how the husband wants to deal with the wife not wanting to submit to not wanting to do whatever it is. And I have to say, look, you need to recognize that there's a difference between a submission issue and a marriage issue. And you're thinking, uh-oh, well, how do I know that? Let's understand this, okay? It starts off with Amos 3:3. Two cannot walk together unless there is an agreement about how to walk. I'm paraphrasing, okay? For two to walk together. Walk means what? Live life. Okay? If you and I are in an employer-employee thing, we're not going to do well unless we have an agreement on how that works. If you and I are a father and a son, that's not going to work unless we agree on how that's supposed to work. If you and I are married, that's not going to work unless we agree on how that looks. Whatever level of relationship we have, there has to be an agreement. Okay? So if you are married and you were both married together, equally yoked in whatever you were in before, and now you've come into covenant and they haven't, you are now unequally yoked. Yoked has to do with under, mentor, or discipleship. Yoking is a discipleship term. Okay, so it says, do not be unequally under instruction with someone who doesn't have the same belief as you. So now you and your spouse are not under the same instruction. You're not under the same guidance. You're not making the same decisions when it comes to the vertical part. You might be fine with the secular stuff, how you activities you do and how you deal with finances and recreation and all this and health and food and whatever. You might be on the same page with a lot of things, but now this one thing has gone sideways. Or this may really show and demonstrate that you've had other problems that you just never really dealt with, but now it brings them out into the open. I told you this with the tithing teaching, that the tithing teaching would bring out if there's a greed problem where you're like a miser with your money and I'm not giving it to anybody. Or it might bring out a finance problem where you don't handle your money right. These things are always there. It's just going to bring it out if it's there. How you feel about money, tithing will bring that out. If you don't have a problem, it'll bring that out. I'm just saying it'll expose that. Well, guess what? This walk, if you come in and your spouse doesn't, will expose if you guys have a good marriage. If you have a good marriage, you'll handle it just fine. That doesn't mean it'll be wonderful, like as if both of you were doing it, but you'll be fine, if that makes any sense. But if you've got other marriage issues, you won't be fine. And it's going to expose some of that. So how do you handle all this? You have to understand that. So first, let's recognize that submission comes out of agreement. That doesn't mean you agree to everything the person says. You agree that you will submit to that person in that area. Is that making some sense here? All right? You come and work for me. You're agreeing to submit to my authority as your employer. We have an agreement. I now have an expectation that you will submit. Okay? If you and I are married and we agree that I'm going to handle the finances or I'm going to be this or whatever it is, then whether I do it well or not, you've agreed you need to submit and allow me to do it the way I need to do it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Well, we agreed first. See, a lot of you got married and you didn't make any agreements. And sickness and health and blah, 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 blah. All right? It's not an agreement. That's a laundry list of disasters you're hoping to weather through. Okay? That's why I have people do the expectations thing before they get married, so they actually can agree on what they're going to do and how it's going to get done. Okay? And that's part of the problem. Now, so you have that first. So now when you're dealing with the Christmas and the Easter, whatever it is, right now we're dealing with the Christmas thing. Okay, so your spouse will deal with it from both sides. Your spouse, so you're the wife, and your husband wants to bring in the tree or wants to do whatever he wants to do. Okay, so now you're going to find out if you have a marriage issue. So you can say to your spouse, you are the man, you are the husband, you have the right as the father, whatever you are in this house, right, to the children, to do these things. That's part of the role we agreed to when we got married. But I'm going to ask you in our relationship to recognize, because I'm walking out my salvation under a higher authority in my personal walk, that while I will not cause you any disrespect in what you want to do, I am asking you to respect that I'm not going to participate. Now you're going to find out if you guys can come to agreement, because you don't have in your marriage, a lot of you have this problem, by the way, you did not agree to all these things before you got married. Remember we talked about the expectation thing. So you had to come up with whether or not you agree with them as they pop up. So this is one that will have popped up if you did not have this covenanting issue when you first got married. So now you have to figure out, can we agree or not? And if you can't, you may not be staying married. Because it's very hard to live in a place where two are not in agreement. You have to find a way to come into agreement, all right? That's the critical piece. You have to come into agreement. And so that's where you now have to respectfully, honoring and not shaming, not treating them like they're idiots and don't you know that that's pagan, blah, 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 but say, hey, I recognize that where you are in your walk, this is what you want to do. And some of you are saying, well, my husband could care less. He just likes to do Christmas. Well, that's his thing. Doesn't matter that he doesn't have a vertical relationship. If he did, it would actually be an easier discussion, because if he did, you could say, you know how important your relationship is up and vertical, etc.? Mine is too. And I do believe in Philippians 2:12. And I am trying to walk out my salvation. You can only talk to someone who's serious about their walk that way. Now, if they're not, that argument bears nothing. Now you got to say, I recognize that this is what you do and that's your relationship. And that's your choice. I need you to recognize this is my relationship and my choice. And then now we got to figure out, can we work that together? Can you be okay with me not participating, and I will make the effort to be okay that you're doing stuff I'd rather not do? Nobody wins in that situation, but it's the only way to make it work. By the way, you have a lot of things in your marriage that are that way, where one of you would rather not do this and the other one wants to do it all the time, whatever it is, and then you don't agree, but somehow one has to do it less and the other one has to do it more, whatever it is. It's like the example I use about the couple who gets married. One thinks they're going to go out once a year on their anniversary. The other one thinks we're going out every week for date night. Well, guess what? That ain't going to work unless they move more towards one's got to do it less and the other one's got to do it more, and then they're happy. So the wife can say, look, it's your house. I recognize your authority in the house. If you want to bring a tree in, understand I would rather you didn't. And that's another gauge of your level of relationship, how much they want to provide for you, whatever. But just as long as you're okay that I'm not going to participate in that. I'm not going to decorate it. I'm not going to sit under it. I'm not going to put presents under it. I'm not going to open presents. I'm not doing this. Okay? I'm not judging you. That's your choice. I'm hopeful that one day we'll both be on the same page, whatever that is, okay? Don't say, hoping one day you'll recognize how pagan and stupid this stuff is. I mean, you got to be respectful and honoring. Okay, so let's understand. So from that side of it, as a wife, this is not a submission problem yet. You have to agree first to it become a submission problem. This was not part of when you got married, you agreed to all this. You guys never talked about it, I promise you. Matter of fact, you probably talked about nothing. You just decided, hey, you want to spend the rest of your life with me? Sure, why not? Okay, and that was it. I mean, you really didn't probably talk about much, you know. I mean, I told my wife, look, we've seen each other every week for a couple of weeks. Let's keep the streak going. Let's make it permanent. She's nodding her head. That's exactly what I said. You laugh. It's true, though. I gave a better proposal than that, but I'm just so you understand. You know, I mean, it just seemed like it was working pretty good. We saw each other a couple of weeks in a row. I said, why don't we just keep this going? Tradition. Okay, so, you know. But you didn't come to this agreement originally. So you don't have a submission problem until you come to an agreement. Okay? Now, hopefully that makes that sense. So I'm sorry, but you're going to find out where your marriage is at. And by the way, this is not what stirred the problem. Your marriage had the problem or it didn't. This is just the excuse for whatever's popping out. Because most of the time it's popping out with people that, for whatever reason, not most, a good percentage of it is with people that don't really care. They have no vertical relationship. They just like Christmas for whatever reason. Okay? They don't have a vertical relationship. But you got to respect, this is what they want to do. That's the husband. And we're talking about from the wife's point of view here. That's the husband. And so that's what it is. If the husband wants to do whatever in his house, it's his house. Now, you don't have to stay married to him and stay in the house. Just remember, it's his house. I'm just trying to keep that balance. So if he wants to bring pork, shrimp, whatever it is, you can say to him, this is no good, and then you have a relationship problem. You're not in agreement. Because you may say, oh yeah, he can do whatever he wants in his house without me here. And that's fine too. You got to figure that out. What you can tolerate, what you can't tolerate. Because one thing to not participate, it's another thing to have to tolerate it around you and be immersed in it. Some people get through that well enough. I know some couples that have been married for a very long time, one keeping kosher, one not, one keeping Sabbath, one not, and somehow their marriage has worked. Not ideally, but it has worked. They've come to agreement where there's enough respect there. But you also have to think about what you can handle and tolerate. Some people can handle and tolerate it because of their relationship is so good with their spouse, they want to keep that, they'll find a way to tolerate it. Tolerating that while you're not participating, I'm not saying participate, right? But tolerating it while you're not participating. Others will be like, I just couldn't do it. Then don't. But you can't force them. You need to say, look, you're basically saying, I lay before you life and death. I lay before you Christmas or me. Okay? Because if you're going to do that here, I can't do that. That's your choice if that's where you want to go. I'm not telling you to do that. Okay? Be respectful. Now, when you have this conversation, I'll deal with the other side of it with the husband's covenant, the wife's not, but when you have this conversation, because I want to say this before I forget, be sure to do two things, the same thing but twice, okay? Start the conversation and end the conversation with what you want, what you prefer. In other words, if you would prefer to stay married, start the conversation by saying, look, we are having some struggles right here, but I want you to know I want to make this work. I want to stay married to you. I don't want to have a problem. I want to see if we can fix this. And then after laying out all the things that are a problem that you need to have adjusted, finish off with, I know that sounds like a lot of whatever it is, but I want you to know that my preference is this, but if we can't work this out, then we may not be able to work this out. But you need to not be saying, I want the divorce. I want to stay. Start and end with what you really want. If you really want it to work, lead with that and finish with it, because they need to know before that if you don't start with it, they don't know where you're going. And if you don't end with it, they're not going to remember that you started by saying, I want to stay. Leave them with a last impression of what you really wanted. I want us, sweetheart, I love you, I want this to work. Start with that, end with that. Then talk about in the middle, what's the problem? What's not in agreement? What needs to be adjusted? Does that make sense? Are we getting that? It's very important, the process, to do the steps correctly. Okay? Now, that being said, now let's take the other side of it. You're the husband. Guess what? You may have a total different marriage problem. You're the husband, you're the head, it's your house. Maybe you've never once worn the pants. That's not my problem. You need to figure out how to put them on one leg at a time. Stand up on your hind legs with your back straight. Treat that woman with respect, but you need to say, but this is not happening in my house. We need to figure this out. We're not putting a tree in my house. We're not bringing pork into my house. Okay, that's something you can do as the head. But you can say, but sweetheart, I realize you're not on the same page with me. I realize that this is not something we're doing in agreement at the moment. So let's find a way to show where you can show her respect, to allow her to have what she can have, but this is still your house. Okay? So you're not going to impose observances on everybody in the house, but you can keep things out of your house if you choose to do so. Okay? Now, you are the head. You could choose to allow her to bring the tree and bring the pork, whatever, not participate in. But I'm saying, but you are the head. You have to figure out how you are going to have that house be. And I know somebody think, well, Rabbi, what would you do? It doesn't matter what I would do. You got to figure out what you would do. I'm totally red. Go back to the color thing for those of you like, for the personality test. I'm not going to act like most of you would act. The speed with which I will make a decision and other things that I will do is going to be from the basis of the fact that I don't have any white or blue. to affect that. So no, don't go with what I'm going to do, because I'm not going to do it like most of you are going to do it, with the speed with which I'm going to do it. And it would be totally inappropriate for me to think that you should or would do that. Okay? But what I'm saying is, understand your role and position. You are responsible for that house, that dwelling. Some of you think, well, I don't have a house, I have an apartment, whatever. You are responsible for the dwelling. You are the priest of that house. So now, if your wife is not going to allow you to have that position, now you have a marriage problem, not a submission problem. So men, don't say she needs to submit. No, you got to get an agreement first. Okay, fix the marriage problem first, then you can worry about submission. You submit to an agreement. We are not submitting to Yahweh randomly. We're submitting to Yahweh because that's the covenant we made. Okay? We made an agreement. Now, by the way, you probably in your marriage vows had an agreement that in her vows said, and to submit myself to you. Okay, that means when we have an agreement, I will submit that you are the one that has the authority in those places. But if a new thing comes up that you haven't agreed on, you're gonna have to figure out a way to agree first. You can't expect submission when there's no agreement. But if I turn to my wife and say, hey, remember we agreed on this? So you need to just let this play out and trust me in this because we agreed. Well, I don't like that. Doesn't matter if she says something like that. I say, but we agreed, so now you need to submit. Submission comes out of agreement. Not agreement with the thing, agreement with how the order of authority is in that particular area. If you agree that he does this and you do that, or she does this and then you have an agreement. Now, how it actually functions is where submission comes in. You may not like the way they do the thing we agreed to. You understand what I'm saying? That's where submission comes in. You and I have an agreement, but you're not liking the way I'm doing the agreement, or I'm not liking the way you're doing it. Well, if you're the one with the authority, I need to submit to that. Doesn't matter that I don't agree with it, with how you're doing it. We had an agreement that it's your authority to do. You understand? Okay? This is really important because this Christmas thing stirs all this up. Two can't walk together. That means you and me, teacher, rabbi, whatever, member of congregation, have to have an agreement and understanding that the way that role works. We're going to be producing at some point here something I can hand to you. That is an expectation sheet that says, this is what I expect from you. This is what you can expect from me. If that works for you, we have an agreement. You can stay and walk in agreement. You can still stay if we don't have the agreement, but it's going to be a little rougher because two don't walk well together unless they're in agreement. Does that make sense? Is that good? Okay? So let's just make sure that we have that understanding. So, marriage issue versus submission issue. Marriage issue first, submission issue second. Because it can't be a submission issue unless there's no marriage issue. Because it has to be an agreement. Any questions on that? Does everybody understand that? Okay. So I just want to make sure that we're covering this because we have almost no more time left on this thing. So much for that. I've got a few more things to say then, and we'll just have me talk today. How unusual. All right. All right, so we covered the Christmas thing, we covered the different holy days, we covered traditions, we covered those observances, we covered this marriage unequally yoked thing, okay? But just remember this, all of you, if you're going to grow into Yeshua-like beings, Yeshua tells us, and we're going to read this when we go back to the teaching again next week. He tells us over and over again how my Father and I are one, and my desire is that you would be one as we are one. What does it mean to be one? They are in agreement on how they walk. Okay? They are in echad agreement about each person's role in the relationship, the expectations, etc. They're in agreement. And he wants us to walk in agreement. Okay? But you got to be careful and say, well, who has to agree with who? Depends on the nature of the relationship. In our relationship with Yahweh, we have to agree with him. He does not have to agree with you. But you have to agree to that. Okay? That's why he says to you, if you can agree to obey every word that comes out of my mouth, I will agree to take care of your stuff, all your needs, and to take care of you, provide for you. Okay? But it wasn't negotiable. Now, thankfully, all other relationships are negotiable on some level. And so you want a better relationship, sit down with your spouse or your child or your parent when things are not, heated, and try to have a conversation about trying to figure out how to come into agreement. Even how you can agree to disagree. Because you can even agree to that. Agree on how you can deal with disagreeing. This is the critical piece of this, all right? Now, I got a couple of more things, and I got like 6-7 minutes. I don't know how I'm going to do this. All right, so world events, COVID, the vaccines, and all that kind of stuff. Just real quickly, a lot of people keep contacting me about decisions about the things that are going on. Look, I know this is not easy, but we don't know yet what it's going to look like. Okay, we don't know really. We have a lot of rhetoric about this might be mandated, that might happen, travel might be restricted, but nothing has happened yet. And so I don't know what it is you want me to respond to since there isn't anything that's happened yet. Okay? Okay. So understand that he's in charge. He's causing or allowing. We're going to learn to respond to things as they happen. Yes, there's rhetoric and talk about this, and this might happen. But you also have to understand there's a lot of talk also by a lot of people saying they're not very excited about those things happening. So there may not be this lemming response of everybody just, walking off the cliff doing whatever they're told. The sheeple are not all sheep. Okay? And so I don't know yet the level of legislators, local and federal. I don't know the number of sheriffs and police or the numbers of individuals or the numbers of doctors and medical and experts that are going to come out for or against whatever actually is trying to be put forth. So your fear is what's the problem. Stop panicking. But there is no but. First of all, nothing has happened yet. Okay? Nothing has happened yet. Oh, but yes, something will happen. We don't know what it's going to look like yet. Okay, we're still in the not enough information thing, okay? We are still dealing with, at this point, the not enough information. You ever take a test, A, B, C, D, and the last one might be not enough information? Remember those in school sometimes? Okay? This is still not enough information. So please, I will come up with a position for MTOI when there's a position required to be taken. Taking one now isn't going to affect anything. Unless you're planning to move somewhere or do something different based on that, which I don't think anybody is, it's going to be what it's going to be, and we're going to have to react to what is when it happens. The leadership will be talking about this on Sunday when we have the meeting a week from this Sunday, okay? And we'll talk about possible options and things that we might do if. So it's not like we're ignoring it. I don't want you to think we're not planning for it. But all of you that keep calling up, well, Rabbi, what if it is? And everybody's calm down. What if all that does happen? I read the book. All kinds of horrible things are coming. Maybe not in your lifetime. Maybe next month. I don't know. But why are you afraid of it? But what if we can't travel? What if we can't do this? What if they want to force us? That's coming at some point. Revelation tells us those kinds of things are coming. And I expect at that point, whatever leadership Abba has here on this planet, he will inspire and guide as to what to do. Okay? Your job is to understand that this is, think of it more like a midterm exam or something bigger than a pop quiz. He's allowing you to really just to be tested to see what level of shalom you can maintain under adverse circumstances. What level of emunah can you maintain under challenging circumstances? And you're all got to score your own cards. Okay, I'm not going to say you're all failing or doing well. Some of you are doing better than others. Some of you are failing worse than others. But you have to look in the mirror in the morning and recognize that your emotional state is really your test results, basically. You're seeing that you're failing or you're succeeding in the test. Stop falling into the pit of despair. Stop falling into fear and anxiety over this. This is going to be whatever this is going to be. Look, if you're going to go into that level of emotion, you're going to demonstrate very clearly to the creator of the universe that you do not believe a word he said in this book. Because it starts with believing his sovereignty. Why would you believe anything else in the book if you don't believe he's in charge? That he's got it all under control. If you don't have emunah, you've got nothing. Emunah is full trust, faith, belief, etc., that everything is under his control. He causes or allows. So what's going on right now? He's allowed it at the very least. He's not like scrambling to figure out what to do. Okay? He knows. So why are we scrambling to figure out what to do? He'll tell me when it's time for me to know. And right now, there's nothing to work with. Nothing has happened. Okay? As of right now, there are no vaccines. Okay? There are some that some countries are starting to utilize, but here in this country, there are none. Now, maybe next week there will be, but right now there is nothing. And when it comes out, they're only planning to give it to certain people, however they want to do, whatever, and we have to see what this actually looks like. There's nothing to react to yet. All right? We're literally afraid of fear. It's like there's nothing to fear but fear itself. I cannot do that accent. Anyway, all right? But that's what we're doing, is we go back and listen to that fear of Yahweh teaching a few times, and the peace in a world not his teaching. Because this is where you guys are struggling right now. This is not his place. He's allowing it to be the mess it is. Because it has to eventually go so far down the rabbit hole and down the whatever that we have absolutely no argument that Yeshua was necessary to return and set it straight. This is him allowing man to prove beyond any doubt that we can't do this on our own. That doing it on our own leads to the end of everything. Otherwise, why would he have to jump in and intervene? Because he knows the way we are. He could intervene right now, but the case has still not been made. We still have a lot of the world that thinks they can do it themselves, doesn't think they need him. So he has to allow it to go that bad. So you ever wonder, why does he allow it to go that bad? Because we need that proof, because we're that hard-headed to think we need him. So he has to allow it to go that bad. Amen? I've got more stuff to say, but I'll do it in the afterburn. So we'll go ahead and end here, and then I have a bunch more on my list. And then maybe I'll actually take questions. All right. Father, we come before you. And Father, we're dealing with a lot of stuff. It's a time of year that we are, on the one hand, we're looking to rededicate ourselves to you, ourselves being a metaphor for the temple. On the other hand, it's one of the most pagan-connected time of year with all kinds of wrong focuses. And then on top of that, the world is just spinning into utter chaos and confusion. So Father, we come to you knowing that we need to come to you. That's the most important thing, that Father, if nothing else we've learned, we recognize how much we need you. We need you, we need Yeshua, we need him to come and return. And so, Father, we come very humbly, acknowledging our frailty, acknowledging our inability to solve our own problems and our own things as individuals and as a people and as a world. And that, Father, we look to you for all things. So, Father, we want to thank you. We want to praise you. We want to give you glory and honor. We want to take all that we learned today and apply it in our lives appropriately as we come to you now in the authority, in the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen. Amen.